All right, class, we're looking at section 10 of Ishmael today. There you go. All right, and what's happened in this section is, there's a series of events that keep our narrator from going back and meeting up with Ishmael, and they're all symbolic of various aspects of civilization that keep you in place, keep you in check. He has to pay his rent. He gets scolded by the dentist. His uncle comes in town. All these things are a metaphor for the way that civilization and the things you have to do to exist in civilization keep you from returning to nature, keep you returning from connecting with that lever part of your inner self. All right, so that happens for a while. He finds out Rachel Sokolow has died, and Ishmael is missing, so he puts an ad out in the paper. Friends of Ishmael, another friend is lost. Contact and tell me where he is. This is a metaphor for the way that when you, as a reader of this book, hopefully if you're engaging with these ideas, that when you're done with this book, this book being kind of like Ishmael, that you won't just simply forget about it and turn your brain off the way that he turns his brain off when he puts this, ad out in the paper. And so he quits engaging with this material when he's apart from Ishmael. But the whole point of this book is that when you no longer engage with this book anymore, you're still thinking about the ideas. You're still thinking, you're still progressing these thoughts and looking at civilization and the world in a whole new way. So I hope that you do that. But anyways, he ends up finding Ishmael. All right. Excuse me. So he ends up finding Ishmael, and he offers to help him out and to help him get back on his feet. But he says, "Look, do you think I want a patron? Do you think you can patronize me?" Here it is, right here. And this is also a little bit of a metaphor. Anytime that a civilization goes in and conquers lever people, there's always people in civilization who, feel guilty or maybe not even guilty, but responsible for helping out those who are trampled upon by civilization, and you can see it all around the world. And generally this comes at the cost of buying into some kind of religion, but oftentimes it's a free kind of generous thing. But the people who have been trampled by civilization inevitably never see it as that. They see it as pity. And it angers them because, these people who are trying to help them out are also part of the same system, civilization, that's destroyed who they are or keeps them in poverty or whatever. And that's what this is kind of metaphorical for here. All right, so now we're going to move on a little bit. All right, to a very important section. All right, and it's chapter 6 up here. Okay, so Ishmael here is talking about the idea of culture. How does culture come about? And they discuss that it is an accumulation, that you pass down knowledge over and over and over again throughout generations. And, this is interesting because I read a study about some orangutans who are being kind of preserved and put on these islands and stuff. I think they even had a show like Orangutan Island, which is about one of the groups, one of the initiatives. But what they found was one group of orangutans were healthier, they had healthier teeth, and they were living longer. And what they found out was these orangutans were digging up the yams that they were digging up out of the ground. They were taken to a creek and washing before they ate them. So it wasn't messing up their teeth. It wasn't destroying their teeth, therefore, cutting down on their longevity. They weren't ingesting the dirt and the sand and the grit. And it was being taught from orangutan to orangutan. Then it spread over the entire island. And then a few of these orangutans escaped, and they went to another preserve with these other orangutans. They taught it to them. So this is how culture has been passed down for years and years and years. It's an accumulation of knowledge, of how to do things. So one of the things that's being discussed here is what kind of knowledge we accumulate and how do we do it. And basically it's talking about how in evolution, our early human ancestors have passed down knowledge for millions and millions of years. It started off, kind of like the knowledge of their orangutans, how to obtain food, how to survive in nature, and it passed that stuff down. How to make a spear, how to make tools, and it gets passed down. How to survive in this place, and it gets passed down. And that's our human ancestry. So one of the points that the book is making is this, that levers pass down knowledge of how to live. They pass down knowledge of how to live in nature for millions of years. It's an unbroken chain of knowledge. And so what they value is knowledge of life, knowledge of how to live. And then when you look at takers tend to pass down knowledge of objects, right? And we get down a little bit more. Sorry to borrow right here where he calls them cultural amnesiacs is what I'm looking for. Well, 1 second, bear with me. Yeah, right before 6 here. He calls them cultural amnesiacs. So it talks about Darwinism. It's talking about passing things down. And sorry, I'm just trying to find the cultural amnesiacs line. It's a little different from in the book. In the book, it's on page 201, right around how do you mean. There we go. It should be somewhere in here. This is on page 121. There it is, cultural amnesiacs. And I want to take a point, make a point with you about this. As far as the compare and contrast essay goes, one of the things you're doing is, you really want to try to flesh out the difference between levers and takers. And levers, the book says, and again, I'm talking on behalf of the book. The book claims that levers know where all of their traditions come from. They can tell you why they do the things that they do. And, because it's a part of that unbroken chain of knowledge that gets passed down for thousands of years and hundreds of thousands of years and millions of years, right? The knowledge about how to live life. And so I could ask you, class, think real quickly, what are your most important holidays, and write them down. And a lot of people would probably say Christmas, Easter, Thanksgiving, Halloween. And so, like, if I asked you specific things like, why is it that we hang stockings on the chimney at Christmas, you probably couldn't tell me. Or if you said, for instance, why do we put presents under the Christmas tree and adorn it, you probably might say something about, the gifts of the Magi, or, the three kings, and all that stuff. But actually, the all of Christmas, it all comes from Celtic holidays. There was a huge ice age type event where they had like a 6 year, well, not an ice age type event, but basically they had like a 7 year winter where everything died except for the evergreens, so they started bringing in evergreens, worshiping evergreens, and started praying for the sun to come back because the clouds are always in the sky. And that's why we put like lights on Christmas trees. They started leaving offering to the nature gods. All these new nature gods start bringing, coming up. They bring in everything green. Everything is an evergreen or green that's alive in the woods, like holly, spruce, fir, all that stuff we associate with Christmas. They bring in, they start praying to. They put lights in it for the return of the sun. They give it offerings or gifts so that life would come back, because people were just dying left and right from this 6 year winter. And that's where we get like our beginnings of Christmas tree. It's and Christmas is a return, to spring coming, and then the end of winter and the beginning of spring. When so a lot of that gets kind of changed around as people are forcibly converted to Christianity through Roman times. But my point is that you may tell me that you value those holidays, but you can't accurately tell me where the stuff actually comes from. The reason that we hang stockings by the chimney, and we've only been doing that since 1921, is because in a little place in New York where a small group of Hungarians came over from Europe, they had a tradition of hanging stockings on the tree, and then a poet wrote this anonymous poem and put it in the New York Times newspaper called, and this, The Night Before Christmas, and all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. And that author had some experience with this Hungarian tradition and included that in the poem. Well, the poem was a huge success. It was published in every newspaper in the country, and within just a few years, almost every American was hanging stockings from their chimney. But you probably couldn't tell me that. Uh, if we go back to Easter, a lot of the traditions of Easter come from Estre, and again, another, Celtic god. And so my point is that we claim that we value these traditions, but we can't really tell the true history of these traditions and why we do the things that we do. But leavers almost always can. Basically what the book is saying here is that we're cultural amnesiacs because our taker culture, the culture of civilization, only truly began about 10 or 12,000 years ago. So we don't really know why we do the things that we do. Another important point that he brings up is that we pass down knowledge as takers instead of life like leavers. We pass down knowledge of objects, knowledge of things, how to produce things, how to make things, how to make money to buy things, how to buy things we don't need, things that entertain us, things. And so, if you think critically about this, you are what you value. So if leavers, native people, value life, then that's what makes their life rich and enjoyable. But we only value objects. So our existence in civilization is somewhat empty when we're putting so much of our value into objects like TV, phones, things like this. And so like, for instance, you guys who are like really, strong family people and some people you might have some outdoors experience, the value that you get on those things that aren't objects, the things like family and things like nature. So you know a little bit what I'm talking about. But imagine if your entire existence is just valuing life. And then that's why leavers lived in paradise. That's why whenever you try to take leavers and force them into civilization, they always resist, often to the point of death. They have to be enslaved. They have to be tricked. They have to be forcibly assimilated. But a lot of times you guys have probably heard that people of civilization go live, in the wilds and in natives, it changes them. You've even probably heard the terms going native. They don't want to come back because they see it's a better and a purer existence. All right. So bear with me one more second. Again, it says that one of the differences, we're looking about page 204 and 205 now, about in this area. So there's the section on things here. All right, so we get into this area, and this area is about how we ought to live. And what it's saying is what we've already discussed, so we get a little repetition. Leavers say there is many ways to live, and there's no one right way. You just do things and figure out what works for you by living. Again, knowledge of life. But inevitably in civilization, we always have these things called laws, where somebody has to tell us the one right way to live. But these laws never really work. I mean, you guys know that some laws are not fair. Sometimes the law, some people in the law are treated unfairly compared to others, the poor and the rich, different races, different sexualities, different people get treated different ways. You better believe that the senators and their kids don't have the same kind of laws, aren't accountable for the same kind of things when they break the law as we are. For instance, just look at the Giuliani stop and frisk policies in New York City. 86% of the time, people being randomly stopped and frisked were Latino or African Americans, and only 14% of the time was it, a Caucasian. So again, we know that these laws don't always work. For instance, some people in the room might think that marijuana should be illegal, and some people might think that it shouldn't be. So from those people's point of view, people are getting arrested for no reason, ruining their lives for no reason. And it changes every so often with laws. But the main thing about changing with laws is it takes a really long time. For instance, staying with our marijuana example, marijuana was made illegal like in 1921, and 100 years later, it's starting to become it's took this long for it to start being, legalized in places. The government rarely ever undoes a law or changes something. They've only done it a handful of times, like slavery and, women, stuff like that. So my point is that takers, have laws that don't really make a lot of sense, that are always argued about because they're always trying to find the one way to live to force it on other people. But leavers try to find what works well for the people right there in their community through trial and error. And if something doesn't work, they can immediately change it. There's nothing written down that says you have to be this way. There's no police, they police themselves. And that's the difference between leaver and taker culture is we have a flawed system that doesn't truly represent everybody or always bring justice, whereas the leavers have a tried and true system that has less than 1% crime, less than 1% mental illness versus, our crime. And this is the difference between intelligence and wisdom. Wisdom is the knowledge of how to live. Intelligence is memorization skills, making stuff, right? Okay. So that is section 10.